this isn't a conversation about what we do inside of learning and development. I believe this is a conversation about how we fundamentally change the nature of learning and performance within organizations. And right now is the time we get to inform that conversation and guide that conversation and use our insights and legacy capabilities to do that, because the organization and decision makers, who are the ones who actually change how things work and change how work works, are going to find their way forward, especially as they find these different unlocks that technology can provide. So again, I think that big picture perspective, reshaping our broader perspective on the value that we can provide, and the goal being helping people do their best. The goal is never learning.
The goal is never learning. Wow. I like how you said that, but I'm also now questioning it. The whole conversation to me lands almost like the personalization pathways in terms of learning and development professionals. We know how hard that is, especially when you have a large enterprise. And so I feel like that's kind of where we're landing with this, right? We have a responsibility now that we have access to automation to make it more human, right? So that people can actually feel themselves within the learning. And so, Mark, I know that, part of your opportunity here, well, you talked about how important it is to bring it to life so that it's real. And I just feel like on some level, we have to think about how AI can help us move past, these metrics, right? Like we're like, okay, we got to have this many completions or launches of this course. So these many people have to take courses versus learning. So JD, I hate to throw it back at you, but can you define for us what you mean by what you said, the last thing you said, which was it's not about learning?
So I recently changed my job title. I used to refer to myself as Chief Learning Architect with Exonify. I removed the word learning and swapped it in for enablement, because I think the word learning carries baggage. It carries baggage inside of learning and development, because oftentimes we're so focused on the concept of and the tactics and mechanics around helping people learn. I think sometimes we miss opportunities to just help people perform or help the organization achieve its goals. Sometimes that requires helping people learn how to do something new. Sometimes it doesn't. And a lot of times it doesn't. But the word learning also carries baggage outside of the function of HR and learning and development. It's just not a word people use regularly. The word training is much more commonly used, especially in the organizations and the types of workforces that I support. I do most of my work with frontline employees in spaces like retail, hospitality, logistics, manufacturing, and the like. When you talk about learning with operations professionals, it doesn't click the same way, because they're not necessarily prioritizing how to help people learn. Everyone agrees on the idea that we need a competent, capable, motivated workforce to get the job done. Everyone agrees with that. I've never had anyone push back. How we get there and how we connect the dots between what stakeholders and decision makers want to or need to achieve and the value that we can provide has to transcend and be bigger than the concept of learning, just like it has to be bigger than the concept of courses. That's part of our toolkit. That's part of the story. It can't be the entire story, because I think it limits our potential. It limits what we can now leverage new technology, inclusive of AI, to do. And it creates that disconnect that we're commonly battling between decision makers and stakeholders and the HR and learning and development function. And that whole like part of the business seat at the table. I can't say the word seat at the table without air quoting. Apologies, everybody. But I think that's where a lot of that comes from, is us struggling to be prioritized and find time and get access to people so that we can help. If we come at it from the perspective of we just want to help people do their best, and we're going to use everything available to us to do that, and AI is unlocking new tools and new opportunities to do that, I think we're in a much better conversation and a much better place than if we try to make this a conversation distinctly about learning. I think that limits our opportunity.
It does. Thank you so much. I'm so glad I asked you to explain, because I'm like, what do you mean? We're here to talk about learning transformed, and you're telling us like learning doesn't matter? Yes, because we need to move from the thing we're trying to do to the results. We want enablement. We want the impact. We want the action. I love that, JD. You're getting a lot of affirmation in the chat from a lot of people talking about